How will we ever make the case for our faith if the way that our faith tells us to make the case, which is putting forth evidences, drawing conclusions, cause and effect relationships, objective truth, the way that the Bible instructs us on how to make our case is now being labeled a product of whiteness? Can you see the horns of a dilemma the culture wants to put us on? And apologetics comes from the ancient Greek word apologia, which means it's a legal term. It's to give a defense. It's a courtroom term. It's a law term. And it's about making your case, marshaling evidence. And so when we think about Paul in the synagogues, as he's going on his missionary journeys, he would go to the synagogue and he would make his case from the Old Testament that Jesus is the Messiah. Making your case and providing evidences for the Christian faith is a deeply biblical idea. As Christians, we don't believe in what's called fideism. We don't believe in blind faith. We have a faith that is deeply rooted and grounded in evidence and case making, as in a court of law. Here's how I think that this intersects with our current cultural moment. If you go back to last summer and the National African American History Museum for the Smithsonian published a now famous infographic. It's called Aspects and Assumptions of Whiteness and White Culture in the United States. So one of those things that is supposedly part of white culture in America is the scientific method. The scientific method, objective, rational, linear thinking, cause and effect relationships, and quantitative emphasis. These are looked upon as being byproduct of white culture. Going back to Acts, the book of Acts, we see case making being made. How is that case making being made? It is being made through what we call in logic inductive reasoning. You're putting forth evidences and then drawing a conclusion. Well, according to the Smithsonian, that's whiteness. That's a product of whiteness. Whiteness is not a term of endearment. Like, that is something that is looked upon in our culture as being wicked and the source of evil, pain and suffering. So if our very religion and our academic thought tradition is now being conflated with whiteness, can you see how it really begins to poison the well in people's minds for even considering evidences for our faith? Jesus rose from the dead. That is an objective fact. That is a result of a cause and effect relationship. But if we're now going to relabel, as a culture, we're going to relabel case making as being a product of whiteness. Can you see where this leads in apologetics? How will we ever make the case for our faith if the way that our faith tells us to make the case, which is putting forth evidences, drawing conclusions, cause and effect relationships, objective truth, the way that the Bible instructs us on how to make our case is now being labeled a product of whiteness? Can you see the horns of a dilemma the culture wants to put us on? How are we going to engage in pre-evangelism? This is a huge problem. And I think it's a problem that I don't see any apologists yet, not saying there are none out there, I just don't know who they are, that are working on this project. Mostly what I have heard is that apologists think that critical race theory is just a fad and it'll just go by the wayside. You know, it's really not something to be taken seriously. That's a lot of the buzz that I'm hearing. Whereas I have a little bit more of a pessimistic view that I think this is going to be around a while. And I don't know how to change that necessarily for apologetics. I don't have that part of the equation thought through of like, hey, do we need to make any shifts? Or do we need to start working on this as apologists of, how are we going to present our evidences when the culture is disallowing our evidences right at the outset? Like, you can't even engage in the conversation of weighing evidences because everything's just my private experience. Yeah, Hannah, she is saying we have to become better storytellers. If we present logic through story, it can penetrate, possibly, but I don't see anybody working on that project right now. I don't even see that this is on most people's radar as being a problem or an issue that needs to be addressed in our apologetics methodologies. When they make these grandiose claims that objective reasoning is white, my immediate thinking goes to, well, people in the Bible weren't white. Like, those are all brown-skinned people. And I also reflect on the reality that the Bible's utterly unconcerned with skin color. And it's just objective truth is a thing. I can't tell you how many conversations I had with Monique where she told me logic was white thinking. And I tell you, I was so confused by that. I never heard of that. But she saw logic as being mean and kind of violent. And I think that that is going to be a formidable challenge, that we're not dealing with a culture where we're going to get our case making is going to be primarily about evidences at the front end. It's about sorting through all of this like sea of emotions that people are going to be having. And so, you know, there's going to be some bumpy times ahead, but I think people who are engaged in apologetics are going to have to start thinking this through of how we work on our case making.